Joshua, Phillip, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
Hey, Tiffany, always a pleasure.
Now, immigration has become one of the major issues for American voters. Now, this administration especially talks a lot about solving the root causes like poverty in other countries. But what about the root causes behind this mass migration that we are seeing at the southern border? Help us understand that.
Well, the root cause is that the federal government, mainly the State Department and the Department of Homeland Security, is actively facilitating the mass illegal immigration to the United States. The reality is, and I've been saying it for a few years now. I did an investigation. I was at the border. I went into Mexico and I researched it. What is happening is this. The United Nations is running the border crisis, and they're doing it using American taxpayer dollars. The organization of the UN running these operations is called the International Organization for Migration. They are giving the illegal immigrants literal cash cards, prepaid debit cards, and they're also giving them envelopes filled with cash. This was called the conspiracy theory and fake news, before, but just recently the United Nations 2024 budget was released and it's in there. And without a doubt, this is exactly what is happening. They are paying people cash and giving them cards to illegally travel to the United States. Once they get to the border, they then hand off a lot of these operations to various NGOs, nonprofit organizations. There's Hebrew groups, there's Catholic groups, there's Lutheran groups, there's all these different religious groups running these nonprofit organizations, which are not necessarily tied into the entire religions, but are people operating these at least under the name of religions, which of course gives them some additional legal protections. They are then busing, shipping, flying, and so on these illegal aliens all around the entire United States. And these organizations also get money from the United States in the form of our tax dollars, and they're also working under the coordination of the International Organization for Migration. In fact, they're even listed as members publicly on the under IOM. At the same time, too, the IOM, International Organization for Migration, has a joint office working directly with the U.S. State Department to coordinate these operations. And so in no way is this organic. This is a well-operating, very intended, it's intended to do this, operation meant to facilitate the bringing in of millions of people into the U.S.
Quite concerning indeed. You mentioned that U.S. tax dollars are helping to fund all of this. Why is the UN doing this? What's the reason here?
You hear two different narratives. Of course, they're talking about the humanitarian crisis, and they're saying that these are the narrative they're using to get a lot of these individuals refugee status and so on, is they say that they are climate refugees. They just, using the narrative of climate justice, they can claim that these individuals are fleeing the damage of climate change. In reality, if you listen to what the individuals kind of leading the circus are saying, what they will say is that this is meant to create global equity. They want to create a form of global equality, and that means balancing out the wealth of the first world nations, mainly the United States, Canada, and Western Europe, with the lack of wealth of many of these poorer countries. And so by flooding the United States, Western Europe, Canada, and other countries with the poorest of the third world countries, they believe they can start creating a form of global equity. The other form of that is what they call, and the CCP is pushing this, as is Russia, by the way, the overthrowing of what they call the unipolar world order.
Sounds in a way like the loss of freedom or the fabric that the United States was founded upon. Given that this is now openly stated in the UN's 24 budget, what can Americans do who don't want their tax dollars going to this?
Well, the funny thing with the border crisis is that it's technically a bipartisan issue. A lot of Democrats don't like it either. New York, Chicago, California, they're going bankrupt paying for it. They don't have the money for it. And you have to ask yourself, what makes it so important that the federal government is even suing Texas if they try to secure the border? They're trying to maintain the open border policy. What makes it so important to the federal government that they're willing to bankrupt New York? They're willing to cause, crime and chaos in a lot of areas. They're willing to risk people's lives, sending them to Chicago where it's freezing cold and where you'll die if you're stuck on the streets. It's so important to them that they're willing to do all of this. So what is it that they want? What is the real agenda for it? The money that is meant to help Americans is being denied to Americans and being given to illegal aliens, violating the laws of our country, with what appears to be an intent to, lower the living standards of the United States and create a system of global equality where we've been lowered from our position. The quality of life becomes worse in order to benefit other countries. And I don't think that's in the interest of most Americans, personally.
And given that, what can Americans do if they do want to change this?
Well, I think the biggest thing in America we have is, of course, the fact that we still have elected government, at least for now. And I do think you should let your elected leaders know if you support it or don't support it. Call them, email them, let them know what's happening, because we now know for a fact that, yes, American tax dollars are being spent on this. Yes, this is a coordinated operation between the U.S. and the United Nations, and they can't deny it anymore.
Joshua, Phillip, thank you so much for your time.
Hey, pleasure. Thank you.